الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. So, just a quick review from last week because this is part of the same story. There is a judge who makes a mistake in his judgment and he decides to go learn from the spiritual teacher, and he goes to visit the teacher in the village and he finds him on the mountain and he starts becoming a student, and as he's learning he has some spiritual experiences, and then what happens? He gets kicked out because of other people plotting against him. Now rewind 6 months before. Good question, we'll talk about that. 6 months ago, that sheikh, he was sitting with his students, and this is Alright, so 6 months prior to this, there was a new student that comes to join the sheikh. And this student, he was the son of a person who was a blacksmith. And what does a blacksmith do again?
He smashes irons and makes
He smashes irons and makes swords and things like this. And he comes to join the sheikh because his father said, when I was young, I was a student of the sheikh and I learned a great deal from him. My son, you've become of age, you can go and join the sheikh now. And the blacksmiths and every single person that had a trade, they used to be part of a guild. They used to be part of a group of people, and every guild had a leader, and their leader would come and give them some words to say while they're working. So one of them would be working on the metal, tongue, and he would be making dhikr, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. And they would decide the prices for the things that they would sell. And if any one of them tried to cheat the system, if somebody walks in, he's new to the town, they don't know the prices. If somebody tries to sell things for more expensive than it really is, and they get caught, the guild leader would come into their shop and would put a piece of cloth over their merchandise that have an ayah of the Quran, and he would say, read this ayah until you realize your mistake. And they would not be allowed to have any customers until they feel shame for what they have done. So there was a whole system set up in that time for working people. And the blacksmith, he sees his son is growing up, he's becoming of age, and he says, my son, I would want you to learn about the religion, so go and study with the sheikh. His son's name is Mustafa. And Mustafa goes to study with the sheikh. He was, a young man, and when he starts learning with the sheikh, the sheikh teaches him, he says, your father is a blacksmith? He says, yes. He says, have you seen your father work? He says, yes, it's hard work. I've worked with him. We used to melt iron ores and we used to make spoons and knives and things like this. He says, how easy is it to take the metal and shape it into what you want it to be? He said, it takes a lot of work. You have to burn it, you have to smash it with the anvil, and you have to hit it really hard many times, and you have to do a lot of work and work on it a lot to get it to the shape you want. He said, my son, you have come to learn the religion. Let me tell you something. He says, your soul, your nafs, it's actually a harder work to shape your nafs into what you want it to be than to shape this metal into what you want it to be. He said, and the fire that burns the iron to make it melted and make it something else, he says, similarly, there's fire that will burn you to shape you into what you want. And as you beat the iron, he says, Allah will give your soul a beating to shape you into what you want. But this is a difficult path. Are you sure you want to walk this path? Are you sure you want to be one of those who works on their nafs? He says, I'm ready, Sheikh. He says, okay, if you're going to do that, Then I'm going to tell you what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told one person who came and accepted Islam. He said, Abshir bil bala. He said, I give you good news of difficulties, hardships. You will see a lot of difficulties in your life. And the man says, I think I can handle it. Sheikh, I'm ready. He says, good. I hope you're ready. Take this bucket of water, go and feed people water. And he gives them a bucket of water. And his training starts. And this man, Mustafa, he was going around doing the same thing, similar to the other training the other students went through. At nighttime, he would come exhausted. And they would sit around the Sheikh, and the Sheikh would tell them some lesson. And the Sheikh says, the most important words you have to learn in your life is La ilaha illallah. He says, La ilaha illallah is the words that give life to your heart. He says, every one of us have some problem. He said, La ilaha illallah is the cure to all of the problems. And he says, slowly Allah will show you what each and every one of you are suffering from. But if you can internalize and understand La ilaha illallah, it will help you. And then he says, the Prophet ﷺ told us that the heart has a small white spot and a small black spot. And every time you do something wrong, the black spot grows and grows and grows until it overcomes the whole heart. He says, if you want to purify your heart, say this. He says, go into your rooms, say La ilaha illallah. And every time you say La ilaha, he says, look this way and say everything that's in front of you is not Allah, La ilaha. And then look at your heart and say illallah, as if like this blacksmith hitting that iron, hit your heart with that illallah. Illallah, illallah, to break apart this black thing that has covered your heart so that the light of La ilaha illallah can enter your heart. And so the students would be sitting in their rooms all night and they're saying La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. And this was their practice. And the Shaykh teaches them that being in the spiritual path, it's a constant purification. You have to be always purifying yourself. He says, Mustafa, let's go shopping with me. So he goes down to the marketplace with Mustafa. He sees a person selling apples. And the Sheikh walks up and he says, how much are your apples? He says, Sheikh, you buy from me every week. It's the same price. This much for a pound. He says, I'll take this one and this one and this one. And he picks all the bad apples and he leaves all the good ones. And he says, Sheikh, why do you always do this? He says, there is a reason for everything. And as he's walking away, he teaches Mustafa, he says, now, you see the cart of apples? How does it look now? He says, it looks better than before. He says, why does it look better? Because we removed the bad ones. And he says, similarly, in yourself, there's good characteristics and there is bad characteristics. He says, a person who's on the spiritual path, you have to be always removing your bad characteristics, and when you leave the good characteristics alone, then you will start to shine and you will start to look really good. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will notice that heart. And so find out what's the bad apples you need to get rid of. And Mustafa that night, he's sitting there and he's saying, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. And he's thinking, what is my bad character? What do I have to remove from myself? And what happens, he starts thinking about life and death and all these different things, and he realizes what's important to him. Every time he says La ilaha illallah, he's saying there is no God but Allah. There is nothing important to me except Allah. But then something comes into his mind and says, but my life is important to me. I want to live. I want to do things when I get out of the school and when I've perfected this science, this knowledge. I want to go and do things and everything. So he goes to the teacher. The next day he says, Sheikh, I think I figured out what's the bad apple inside me. He says, what is it? He says, I'm attached to my life. I don't want to let go of my life. The Sheikh says, why do you think that? He says, because yesterday I was saying La ilaha illallah, but every time I was saying La ilaha, there is no God, there is nothing important to me. In my mind, I kept feeling that I am important to me. My life is important to me. And I feel like, when I get out of here, I want to do things with my life. I want to go to this place. I want to visit that place. The Sheikh says, okay, then this is your test. You have to get rid of your love for life. You have to let it go. He says, what should I do? Commit suicide? He says, no. He says, you have to die without dying. You have to die without dying. He says, Sheikh, I don't understand. He says, Sheikh, I don't understand. He says, you see, inside us, there is the nafs. And the nafs wants to take control of your life. The nafs wants to make you do things that you're not supposed to do. You have to let your nafs die. And you have to accept death, because death is going to come to you anyway. But if you accept death willingly, and you say, Ya Allah, I'm ready to die, I'm ready to meet you, that's when your nafs have died. And now you are ready to start walking truly on the spiritual path. The man starts thinking, he says, how can I let my nafs die? It's very difficult. So he starts going through his day-to-day activities. The sheikh one day gives him some metal to go work on. The sheikh gives him some other thing to work on. He gives him some water to work on. And one day, the sheikh, in the middle of the night, comes into his room, and the man is sitting there, Mustafa, he's saying, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. The sheikh says, Mustafa, I have a job for you. He says, go to your father's store. Take some of the knives and take them to the city. And there is a group there, they're willing to buy these knives. You have to sell these knives to them. He says, okay, Sheikh, whatever you say. He goes to the blacksmith and he comes down and his father is beating this iron. Tum, 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 tum. Across the street there's a guy carving marbles, chipping away at the marble. There's another guy, he's a carpenter, he's sawing off pieces of wood. And he comes to his father and says, Father, is there any knives that you have for sale? Sheikh told me to take some knife and take it to the city and sell it to one of the businessmen that's coming there. And this knife has meaning for this person. It means something. His father says, I have only one knife ready. He says, maybe that's the one Sheikh wants you to sell. Here, take it. And he gives him this knife wrapped up in a cloth. And this knife is beautifully decorated. It's got all these different designs on it. And it has on the blade carved into it, La ilaha illallah. So he sees the knife. He says, wow, this is a beautiful knife. Thank you, Father. And he wraps it up and he starts walking towards the city. When he gets to the city, he goes to the place the Sheikh told him to go. And he's waiting there, and he's waiting there, and he's waiting there. And it's some park somewhere in the middle of the city. And as he's waiting there, he falls asleep. He falls asleep and he sees a dream that there are people coming around him and they're grabbing him and they're taking him into prison. And he's saying, I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't do anything wrong. And they're saying, you are the one who did this, you are the one who loves your life, and now you have to give up your life. And as they throw him into the prison, he wakes up and he checks around, he sees the knife is gone. He says, oh my God. The Sheikh had told me to keep this knife until so-and-so, such and such a person comes to claim it. He says, I have lost the knife, how can I face the Sheikh now? And he starts frantically looking for the knife. He's going this place and he's going that place. And lo and behold, he comes across a person who's on the floor. There is blood around him and the knife has been stuck into his body. And he recognizes the knife. He says, this is my knife. And he looks around and he's shocked. He has never seen a person die before. And now he's thinking, my knife is the reason somebody died. He's shocked and he goes to pick up the knife, and as soon as he pulls it out, he hears a person from the distance. He says, you there, stop! And he gets scared. He drops the knife and runs away. And the person starts chasing him, and tackles him down. He says, you murderer, you're coming to justice. And he grabs him, and more people surround him, and they grab him, and they say, you're going to jail. And he says, I didn't do anything wrong. And they throw him into jail. And he's thinking, uh-oh. He's thinking, my goodness, what's going to happen to me? They're going to kill me. I didn't do anything wrong. I was asleep. Somebody stole my knife or something. I don't know how it happened. And as he's in the jail, he's thinking, what happened? Somebody comes to the gates of the jail, and it's the person who was chasing him. He says, my name is Yunus. I am the big judge in this town. He says, usually I work really hard to solve cases, but in your case, O murderer, don't you fear Allah? Don't you fear Allah? Don't you know that whoever kills an innocent person, it's as if they have killed all of mankind? How could you do that? He says, Judge, I didn't do it. He said, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. I saw you with the knife. I saw you stab the person, pull it out. I saw you run. As soon as I called out to you, you ran away. If you were innocent, you wouldn't have run. You would have stayed there. He says, Judge, Your Highness, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. It was my knife. He says, I knew it was your knife. I know it's your knife. You are the one who did this. Wait until the justice of Allah comes to you. I'm going to be harsh with you, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, as Dhul Qarnayn said, those who are good, I'll be good to them. And when I'm done, Ya Allah, you will reward them. But those that are bad, I will give them the difficult time in dunya. And when I'm finished with them, the greater punishment is coming to them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, I'm going to give you whatever punishment I can in this world. He says, but in the hereafter, Allah will deal with you. And as he's walking away, the man says, Your Highness, I didn't do it. And he's calling out, and the judge walks away. And he sits there and he's thinking, man, what kind of trouble am I in? What is this difficulty? How did I end up in this situation? And he starts thinking, what should I do? Right? He's about to lose his life and everything's going to go downhill for him. And so he starts getting worried and he's thinking, what should I do? He doesn't know anything. You know the rest of the story, how it happens. But he doesn't. And so in his mind, he's about to die. And he has to accept this reality. And so he's thinking about all of his dreams. I'm going to die tomorrow. They're going to execute me tomorrow. And I wanted to go to this place, and I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do that. And he's thinking about everything, and he remembers what the Shaykh told him. You need to accept death. You need to die without dying. And so he sits there in the jail cell, and he says, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. And the next day, the guards come and they grab this person, and they bring him to court, and the family of the person who had died, they come, and the judge says, I am a witness that this man was standing over the dead body with the knife. He says, I am the judge also, and so I condemn this person as guilty because I myself am the witness. He says, family of the victim, what do you think should happen with this person? And the woman comes up to him, says, that was my husband. He had 2 children, and you cruel person. She slaps him on the face. How could you do this? You were so evil. And he starts crying, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. And she's in this emotional state. She says, Judge, what are my choices? The judge says, if you want to forgive him, you can't forgive him. If you want to sue him, you can ask him to pay you money. But if you want revenge, you can ask us to execute him. She says, I don't want to see this person alive because my husband is dead because of him. His children are orphaned because of him. I want this person dead. Oh judge, please give us justice in this dunya. And Allah is the best of judges. And so the judge says, it has been settled then. In the coming Friday, after the Jummah prayer, we will execute this man in public and we will make a show of it and everybody will see how we deal with murderers in this town. And as soon as the judge says these words, this person, Mustafa, his heart sinks. He says, oh my God, that's it. You're going to kill me now. And he grabs one of the guards. He says, please, there's no way I can prove my innocence, but I can tell you, please deliver this message to my teacher. He wanted me to deliver this knife to somebody, and I don't know how I ended up in this mess. Please send this message to my teacher and have him come talk to the judge. And so what happens, this guard says, you know what? You don't look like a bad guy, but I'm not the judge. I don't know who's guilty, who's not. If the judge says you're guilty, you're probably guilty, but I will do this favor for you. I'll take your message to this person. So he takes this letter written by this person, and he goes over to visit the Shaykh. And when he walks into the city, the first thing he sees is a person walks up to him, and he says, you're coming from the city? He says, yes. He says, do you know the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed? He says, Kalimat Tawheed, La ilaha illallah? He says, yes, La ilaha illallah. Do you know the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed? He says, it means there is no God except Allah. And the man looks at him, he says, everybody keeps saying that, but you don't know the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed? He walks away. And the guy's like confused, what kind of town is this? And as he walks, he sees these different people, guilds, working on metal and everything. And the blacksmith notices this person walking, and he sees this letter rolled up in his hand, and he sees the Shaykh sitting next to him. And the Shaykh says, that man is here to talk to you. The blacksmith says, are you looking for so-and-so? He says, yes, this person sent me here. There's something, trouble with a knife. He says, yes, that's my son. What's going on? He says, this is a letter for you and some sheikh. He says, okay. And they open the letter and they start reading, and the sheikh says, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to test this person with life because he was attached to life. And so, pack your things, let's go to the city. So the father and the sheikh together, along with 2-3 students, they go to visit this great judge, Judge Yunus. And they go to him and they say, Judge, you have been deceived. This man here is not capable of doing something like this. And as they're trying to convince the judge and they're telling the judge that you're wrong in your judgment, and what happens, the judge gets upset. He says, how can you say I'm wrong? I'm the judge. I saw it with my own eyes, and there is no more clear case than this one. He's going to be executed this Friday. You come and watch it also. This is how we deal with murderers here. There has to be justice. Now, is justice a good thing?
No.
Yes. Justice is a very good thing. But sometimes people are not able to do full justice. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best judge. That's why sometimes people can make a mistake in their thinking. And is this judge making a mistake? Yes, absolutely. So what happens? They come on the day of Friday and they bring Mustafa, the prisoner, and they put this rope around his neck. And Mustafa's heart is beating faster and faster and faster. And all these thoughts are going through his mind. Oh my God, I don't want to die. I'm too young to die. I still haven't done this. I still haven't done that. And people are gathering after the prayer. They're coming out and they're like, oh, isn't that the guy that murdered so-and-so's husband? Yeah. And people are talking. And Mustafa is just looking out. And he sees his father. He sees the sheikh. He sees his brothers from the school. And he's thinking, they're here too? Right, they're here too. And then he remembers what the sheikh said. You have to die. You have to die without dying. And at that moment he says, Ya Allah, if you don't give me life, I'm a dead man. If you don't give me life, I'm a dead man. And he closes his eyes. He says, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum. Oh, the one who's living. Oh, the one who's self-sufficient. Ya Hayyu alladhi la yamut. He says, oh, the living one who doesn't die. He says, I just realized now, my heart has been dead. This whole time, I was pretending to be religious. I was pretending to be on the straight path. But this whole time, instead of being attached to you, I was attached to myself. Instead of loving you, I was loving myself. He says, Ya Allah, I see how wrong I was. And then he says, La ilaha illallah. But this time, when he says La ilaha illallah, it has a different meaning for him. It has a different meaning for him. And as soon as he says La ilaha illallah, and he closes his eyes, he feels his heart expanding, like this light is coming out of his heart, and this smile comes into his face, and a teardrop comes down. And he's like, SubhanAllah, how did I not know this before? And even though he's about to get killed, he feels this peace and tranquility just surround him from all sides. And he's thinking, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me. This is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And as he's accepting his fate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the guard he gave the letter to, he comes running and says, Judge, we're making a mistake. I found the real killer. And they bring this person, and the person has admitted to the killing, and then they remove the ropes from his neck. And then the judge, suddenly his face is changed. And the judge looks at the sheikh, and the sheikh is looking at the judge smiling. And he goes like this, and he walks away. And what happens next? You know. And next week, inshallah, we'll continue what happens, because you have to know the story of Mustafa, because after Yunus is kicked out of the school, him and Mustafa, they start doing something together. And you have to know the history with him, so you can understand and appreciate the rest of the story. We're going to stop here. We have, when is Isha? So we have some time. Break into groups, make small groups. Let us discuss what we learned from this story, because there's a lot we can take from it. judge is not very strong, but he's really smart. He has hair. Chip? Who? The teacher? The teacher, he has white hair, white beard, and he works with a cane.